Welcome back to Chris White Africa. This is Chris coming to you from central Pennsylvania. And a new segment as we start off with, what did the DEMS do this week? Well, let's talk about the actions of Democratic politicians around the United States this past week. It should be an interesting segment as we go forward from here on out, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot for tuning in and joining us here on Chris White Africa. Well, let's get right into it, folks. I have to work on the fade on that a little bit better, but I hope that you found that useful and enjoyable, that interesting opening music. So welcome back once again to Chris White Africa. And here we go. Let's start off with what the Dems did this week. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the top Democrat in the United States, none other than President Joe Biden, who this past 10 days or so has signed 42 executive actions, including an unprecedented number of executive orders, many of which are unconstitutional, undermine national security, and exhibit a fair amount of xenophobia and racism. Specifically, let me mention, he has unconstitutionally blocked the Keystone XL pipeline, does not have the authority to do that as the chief executive, and has unconstitutionally used his executive powers to block it, costing tens of thousands of jobs, businesses folding up in the Bakken Basin already, and throughout the upper Midwest. Well, what a mess Joe Biden has made right out of the gate with Keystone XL pipeline banning. In addition to that, he signed executive orders blocking road traffic from Mexico and Canada. Last time I looked, most people from Mexico were people of color, thereby making, in the logic of the left and Joe Biden, the candidate, making Joe Biden a racist. Well, his own words, the Democratic Party's own words. If you don't let brown people in this country, you're clearly a racist, Joe. As far as the other term to come into play here, remember last year, approximately, 1 year ago today, President Donald Trump blocked travel from China into the United States. Air travel was stopped from China after just two confirmed cases of COVID-19 in January. And just 8 days after the first case turned up in this country, Donald Trump stopped travel from China. And what was the response from then Mr. Biden? On February 2nd of 2020, Joe Biden said that the actions of Donald Trump are xenophobic. That's right. And again, a couple of days later, he said the same thing, called him xenophobic. Of course, his current White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, claims that that's a mischaracterization of what Biden said. Well, in fact, his tweets spell out that Joe Biden called Donald Trump xenophobic for blocking traffic from a far-off distant country where, in fact, the virus originated. With good reason and good cause, Donald Trump took that action. Yet he was targeted by people like Schumer, Pelosi, and, of course, Joe Biden, calling him a xenophobe and racist. Meanwhile, Joe Biden closes the border with Mexico. No one's calling him a racist. Well, maybe I am, but who else? Who's pointing out the obvious? Now, I'm using the logic of the left. I don't know if he's really a racist, but if we follow their logic, he is a racist. And he's a xenophobe because while Canada has a diverse population, the majority of its population remains Anglo-Saxon or white European in origin. Therefore, blocking people from Canada from coming across is clearly xenophobia because America comes first in Joe Biden's mind. That must be his reason for closing our borders with our nearest neighbors and part of the United States-Canada-Mexico trade agreement. Wow. There you go, Joe. So the Keystone XL pipeline, additional orders undermining national security, stopping construction of the border wall in the south, and directing Immigration Customs Enforcement officials to stop detaining criminal alien invaders from coming across our border. Well done, Joe. You're stopping the borders, letting legitimate Mexican people of color from entering our country for business, family purposes, holiday, or medical care. But you're allowing criminal alien invaders to come across our border by telling our immigration officials to let them go and hope they show up for a court date. Well, that's quite astounding given that you're the commander-in-chief there, Unity Joe. Well, that's what starts things off with the president, and from there it just all rolls downhill and it gets worse, folks. Let's talk about some of the other things taking place. Well, right off my notes here on the news this week, we have Missouri Representative Cori Bush is whining and complaining that she's scared. Ooh, that's right. She says on Friday she mentioned she had to move her office away from GOP Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying that she did so for her own team safety. Wow. Now, Bush said in a tweet that the Georgia Republican had targeted me and others on social media. Ooh, this scary social media. That's right. Frightened for her life, she's asked Speaker Pelosi to move her office. Seriously? Wow. This is what happened when you send snowflakes to Congress, folks. An aide for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi confirmed to NBC News that Bush's office had, in fact, been reassigned. This room assignment change was by direct order of the Speaker. Now, Bush referenced the 6 January events that took place at the Capitol by a group of Trump supporters and agitators who had nothing to do with Trump, but are called Trump supporters, and we know better. I was there, interviewed these clowns. They weren't Trump supporters. But she called for the expulsion of members who incited the insurrection from day one. Wow, this hyperbolic, nonsensical language from these leftist clowns is just off the charts. They'll lie and say anything under the sun to destroy their enemy. They're not legitimate legislators. They're just political hacks who are sitting in seats. Well, in the wake of that invasion, she introduced a resolution directing the House Ethics Committee to investigate whether any lawmakers who tried to overturn Biden's electoral victory had violated their oath and should face sanction, including removal from the House of Representatives. Of course, the only way to remove a member of the House or the Senate is through expulsion. Impeachment doesn't apply to the House or to the Congress. It's a separate branch of the government. And the only way to evict a member is through expulsion by members voting them out of office. And it's happened 15 times in the Senate and a number of times in the House as well. But here's the thing. Anyone who raised an objection to the certification of states' results from the Electoral College wasn't violating their oath of office. They were fulfilling their oath of office. So not only is she ignorant, a moron, and completely clueless as to how the Constitution and federal law works, but she's clearly just a troublemaker who does not understand our system of governments. And anyone who seeks to follow the rule of law, if it doesn't agree with the leftists, they accuse them of breaking their oath and expelling them from the House. Utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. Wow. Well, folks, let's talk to Crypt Keeper number 1. That's right, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the 18,000-year-old Speaker of the House of Representatives, has talked this week about the enemy within the House of Representatives. Ooh, we should be very frightened, folks. Apparently, there are people in the House of Representatives that are a danger to the representatives. She said that putting Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on a committee was appalling. Well, I think I could say the same thing of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, all of these people who have expressed very virulent, shameful anti-Semitic remarks from Congress seem to be a threat as well, depending on how you code these things, Speaker Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi told reporters on Thursday she's concerned about threats against members of Congress and suggested the enemy is within the House of Representatives. Well, call Ghostbusters, because apparently you've got a real problem here in the House of Representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, somebody call a cop. Well, there you go. Now, she says that the House may likely need to pass more money for member safety. Now, I realize there's more than 435 people who access the Capitol building each and every day. And it's not just the Capitol building, it's also the Rayburn office building directly adjacent to it and a few other ancillary facilities that are related to Congress. But the Capitol Police alone spend over $500 million a year in security at Capitol. And we saw what that got us. No cops on duty, less than 100 police officers present, visible, and no barriers, no security plan, no reserve forces, no coordination with the National Guard, the Department of Defense, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The list goes on and on. No presence from the D.C. Metro Police. It's shameful. That's what $551 million gets us, $500 million each and every year. It's absolutely insane, folks. $500 million for 2,300 police officers, 2,100 police officers. Over $500 million. And they represent a grand total of 435 members of Congress, plus 100 senators. So 535 people, plus their staff. So altogether, we're probably talking 5,000 or 6,000 people there in the building each and every day, maybe more. And for that, we spend $500 million per year. Wow, that's insane. I wonder if that compares to the private security forces that guard the Pentagon on the other side of the Potomac, what the actual dollar figures are. Well, she also had this to say: we will probably need a supplemental for more security for members when the enemy is within the House of Representatives. A threat that members are concerned about in addition to what is happening outside. Well, the fraudulent pretext of a fake insurrection and non-existent domestic terrorism when 36 criminal invaders, trespassers, went inside of the Capitol building that was undefended and about 70 to 90 people were allowed in by police is hardly justification for the pretext that was used to keep the people from attending the president's inauguration, thereby preventing our freedom of assembly, and now planning on a permanent fence. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, folks. But she says, we have members of Congress who want to bring their guns on the floor. The right to keep and bear arms is a constitutional right, Nancy. I realize that the Constitution is something you really don't give a flying flip about other than wipe your backside, but it is, in fact, the basic law of this country. And laws that you create do not supersede it unless they become constitutional amendments ratified by the requisite number of state legislatures. So, for instance, House Resolution 1, which is currently on the table for Congress to pass. This is the For the People Act, which is more like for steal the republic or destroy the republic. That's really what that thing is about. Utter nonsense. If you take a few moments, folks, and take a look at the 791-page piece of bloated garbage designed to circumvent the Constitution, the creation of none other than Queen Nancy Pelosi herself. Unbelievable, folks. But the right to keep and bear arms is a constitutionally enshrined right. Now, that doesn't mean the members get to automatically carry them into the Capitol building, but they are allowed to carry them in the Capitol building unless something is put in place to prevent that. And so she's scared of armed members of Congress, American citizens, those taking oath to support and defend the Constitution. I guess the same way they're afraid of members of the military with their fraudulent checking of backgrounds of military. Yeah, check the backgrounds of some of these people in Congress. That's where you need to take a look at. And it said, she says, we have members of Congress who want to bring guns on the floor and have threatened violence on other members of Congress. Oh, stop. Stop with the nonsense. Threatened violence? Good Lord. We can run through a litany of tweets and press conferences from Democratic caucus members in the House of Representatives, in the Senate, with the threatening language, the lies, the obfuscation, the utter nonsense that they've spewed about the former president, about members of Congress, about private American citizens. Yeah, please, the list goes on and on. The threats come from the mouths and the sewage spewed by leftists inside government. Well, folks, did you know that President Biden has announced that the General Service Administration will replace this entire fleet of about 678,000 motor vehicles with all electric cars? Wow, good news for Elon Musk and Tesla. Yeah, well done. Maybe Toyota too. Not coincidentally, folks, just by pure happenstance, the Crypt Keeper herself, Nancy Pelosi, or her husband, have purchased call options at a stake price of $500. And Tesla shares, not coincidentally, have risen to $640 to $890 since they bought the options. Funny how that works. Gee, would that be insider trading, perhaps, Nancy? Who knows? Anyway, folks, moving on from Nancy Pelosi, let's talk about the real Crypt Keeper, Senator Chucky Schumer in the Senate, now the majority leader in a 50-50 deadlock Senate. And of course, the deciding vote, if it's a 50-50 outcome, is Kamala Harris, the vice president. Well, Senator Schumer is now pushing for the federal legalization of marijuana. Nothing in the Constitution gives the federal government the right to legalize marijuana. This is a decision left in the individual states. But he wants to do this. Senator Schumer said he's putting together a new federal marijuana legislation bill that would allow states freedom to do whatever they like. Well, isn't that nice, Chuck? Thanks. So the rule of law really doesn't matter. Do whatever the hell they want. And put tax revenues into minority communities most harmed by prohibition. So you're going to racialize society by taking tax revenue and securing it only for a segment of the population that you, Chuck Schumer, have determined are somehow marginalized. Yeah. How about the sale of marijuana harming kids and people in these communities where people of color live? Shouldn't that be a bigger concern of yours, Chuck? But I don't think it is. Old Chucky Schumer, the Crypt Keeper, doesn't really care about that now, does he, ladies and gentlemen? You tell me. Well, you can't. The chat's off tonight for this new section that we're doing here. What did the Dems do this week? He said the following. He said, I don't want to see these big tobacco companies coming in and shoving everyone out. So it's not simply about providing dangerous drugs to people at will. It's also about racialization of society, and it's also about state control of who's a winner and who's a loser. Wow. Not many tobacco companies involved in the marijuana trade there, Chucky. Mostly small growers and small operators. Take a look at Colorado. Not exactly Philip Morris and Altria that's out there running these operations. Wow. Well, beyond that, folks, Chucky Schumer, the Crypt Keeper, is also trying to upset the apple cart, monkeying around once again with the student loan program. You know the student loan program. When I was a student and went to university back in the day, and I was poor, so I qualified for a student loan, the full amount, which I had to borrow and repay. Unlike the students today who have life handed to them on a silver spoon with interest rates below 4%, 3%, 2%, my interest rate was 9% because the prime lending rate was over 13% at the time. So it was preferred rate, but not the generous terms that these people get today and whine about it. So I made my student loan back then, and I paid it back. I paid it back in full, folks. That's right. But Chuck Schumer, we've already gone from a program in which the federal government guaranteed student loans for people who had lesser means, like myself back then, poor people, which meant that they would pay if I defaulted and they'd come after me rather than the bank losing money. What that meant is that the loans were all made by commercial banks. It wasn't the federal government that loaned money, it was commercial banks. The government set the rate, the commercial banks loaned it to students, and the government guaranteed that it would be repaid. So there was less risk for the banks, thereby they loaned it to, and a lot of people defaulted on their loans, 5, 10%, maybe more in some cases, and the federal government paid the loan back to the borrower or to the lender, and then they went after tax returns and after assets for the people who didn't pay the student loans. Well, during the Obama administration, the government stole the student loan program from the commercial banking industry and put it in the hands of the government. So it's now we, the taxpayers, that loan money out to student loans. And now Chucky Schumer wants to forgive those loans for the debt owed to us by people who've gone to university, who now find themselves in a privileged position in which their earnings will dwarf those of non-4-year university graduates in our society. So why should plumbers and candlestick makers and strawberry pickers, as well as servers and wait staff, have to fund your kids' education and they get a free ride? That is not just, that is not moral, but that is the left, and that is Chucky Schumer, because giving away things free at your expense and my expense is the order of the day with these lunatics. Well, let me continue, folks. So here's what he had to say. He took a tweet out and he said, and this is an interesting tweet too, by the way. Let me mention this. Today would be a great day for President Biden and Vice President Harris to #cancel student debt. What the hell does Vice President Harris have to do with it? She doesn't sign executive orders. She has no role in this. No one's ever sent a tweet out saying, today would be a good day for the president and vice president to do this. Nonsense. You see how Chucky, the crypt keeper, is already preparing the ground for when Joe Biden trips over a puppy again and breaks another ankle, or he's having a little trouble remembering what day of the week it is, or telling us that he's a proud Democrat running for the Senate, and they use the 25th Amendment to exit him from the stage. Yeah. Remember that? Wow, folks, that's coming. In case if you need your evidence, it's right there. They're already tweeting about Vice President Harris, who has no role whatsoever in this. But a lot of people took umbrage with this on both sides of the aisle, canceling the debt, because this is what one user said. Cancel mortgage debt too. Said, can you cancel my mortgage? Can I go and buy a new truck and get that canceled too? You see, I agree. It's an insult to people who pay back their loans, which is the vast majority of people who earned their way through life, didn't have it handed to them by crypt keepers who've never held a job other than sucking off the government teat like Chuck Schumer. Well, folks, another one says, well, pay back the loans of those who already paid them off. He said, I'm a liberal to the core, but I paid for my kids. I would have loved that Ferrari. Would you give me my money back, Chuck? Wow. And yet another user talking about cancel all student loans. This one's in favor of getting rid of them instead of just a certain amount. And this one says Biden should cancel all of it. $10,000 is not enough. $50,000 is not enough. We need full cancellation center. And I think you need an enema, whoever that user was, because you are absolutely clueless about how life works. You are absolutely clueless. Now, moving on, folks. Another user had the following to say: pay your own student loans. He said, this is unfair for every student who worked their way through college, suffered through community college to save, for those who served to get free college. It was me the second time around. And for those who scrimped and saved to already pay loans back. You can't make any argument to me that my family should pay for your kids to go to college. We paid for ours, you pay for yours. And I can only add to that, shove it. There you go. Foot-sec. Bye-bye, Chucky. Your idea is ridiculous. Well, folks, from one crypt keeper to the other to the upstart in the Congress. And there she is. That's right. AOC, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the famous New Yorker who can't balance her checkbook, can't pay her credit card bills, and is a failed bartender. And on top of that, she apparently has an Ivy League degree in economics, but doesn't understand how the unemployment rate works. Yeah, I'm not making it up, folks. These are the facts. On top of that, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is most famous for canceling out 25,000 direct jobs from Amazon in her own district in New York, and probably another 70, 80,000 jobs that support that industry. Wow. Well done, AOC. Well, what does she have to say this week? Now, I hope that she won't be a regular feature of What Did the Dems Do This Week, but I have a feeling she might just be that. Well, folks, AOC rejects support from Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, over the situation in Wall Street with GameStop and other things taking place. And she said that she accused Senator Cruz of trying to get me killed. Oh, God. gosh, on the 6th January insurrection. Again, folks, not an insurrection. Clearly, if you think that's an insurrection, you don't understand the definition of the word, and you are completely lost. And that includes Representative Ocasio-Cortez. She called for his resignation from the Senate. Well, I call for her expulsion from the House of Representatives for the embarrassment that she is. That's right. And when I run from Congress, feel free to take this clip and use it against me because I can back it up. Anyway, so she said the following. She said, I'm happy to work with Republicans on this issue, the GameStop and what happened with the stock traders stopping small fry investors from getting their money out. She said, I'm happy to work with Republicans on this issue where there's common ground. But you almost had me murdered 3 weeks ago, so you can sit this one out. With the cheek, the arrogance, the disrespect shown by Representative Ocasio-Cortez for a senior member of the government that outranks her is palpable. She says, happy to work with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed. In the meantime, if you want to help, you can resign. Wow. I recommend you take your own advice there, AOC. Take your own advice. She continued, you haven't even apologized for the serious physical and mental harm you contributed to from the Capitol Police and custodial workers to your own fellow members of Congress. In the meantime, you can get off my timeline and stop clout chasing. Ooh. Listen to the tweet extraordinaire, attention-seeking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attacking Senator Cruz for what she assumes that people over the age of 22 don't know. Clout. Yeah. Wow. Talk about one insult after the other. Well, that's not enough for AOC. She just has to go even further. She and Jamal Bowman have proposed $50 billion in tax increases. Wow. It's not enough for Joe Biden to destroy 80 to 100,000 jobs with the stroke of a pen his first day out of the gate. Nope. Now his little minions in the House of Representatives have got to continue this process by destroying yet more jobs with ridiculous taxation. She was quoted saying, it's not complicated. We have to make sure that wealthy pay their fair share. Wow. This broken record, this canard about wealthy paying their share has been debunked so many times, it's hardly worth mentioning. But the poor and working families in this country pay virtually nothing in taxes between the child care credit, earned income credit, and low taxation rates, and the ridiculous, unfair, unconstitutional progressive tax rate in which those who are more successful, work harder, and achieve more are punished for their success by our members of Congress. Yeah, working families pay virtually nothing in terms of actual dollar amounts into the federal treasury. The vast majority of income tax that goes into the federal treasury, which is the largest source of income to the federal government, the personal income tax, comes from wealthy individuals and middle-class individuals. So knock it off. Stop your lying, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She said New Yorkers shouldn't have to settle for underfunded schools, mass transit, and crumbling infrastructure. Underfunded mass transit? Well, you blame that on New York. It's not my job to pay for your crappy subway in New York. I don't use it. It doesn't profit and benefit me in any way whatsoever, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So if you want better subways in New York, you need to talk to Albany. You need to talk to Gracie House, Gracie Mansion there in New York, where Bill de Blowhard is working. Don't take money out of my pocket. Wow. Underfunded schools. Well, I'm not even going to address that. But between the two of them, AOC and Jamal Bowman, they proposed 6 bills, ladies and gentlemen, 6 bills. That's right. They claim it'll raise taxes by $50 billion. But these claims are always hollow. Every time they raise taxes, they actually get less money back than they intended because they harm the economy in a fashion in which people either hide money or they crush jobs and they destroy income for companies and cause great harm, which is what they always do when they raise taxes. Look at what happened when Donald Trump lowered corporate taxes from the second highest in the developed world, 35%. Only Japan had a higher tax rate. And look at Japan's stagnant economy for 33 years now. By contrast, Donald Trump lowered our ridiculously high corporate tax rate from 35 to 21%, and this country bloomed like it hasn't seen in ages. Well, let's see. They want higher progressive income taxes on the wealthy. Of course they do. Punish those who create jobs and those who earn. Yeah, that's the best way to do things. You envious people. That's $15 billion according to them. Taxes on capital gain investments like stocks, raising $7 billion. Now, it's interesting because she just came out asking for an investigation by the government into what happened with Robinhood and Acorns and all these other little stock traders who purportedly blocked small traders from selling and buying their shares of GameStop in order to put a brake on the price rising. In other words, manipulating the market. So she wants to investigate that, but then she also wants to tax it. So you're going to tax the little guy? Jeez. And that's $7 billion they claim. Boosting the estate inheritance taxes by $8 billion. Of course, take it away from families. You work so hard your whole life to provide for your kids and your spouse, so that when you die, they have something, and then they just take it all away from you. Disgraceful. They didn't do a damn thing to earn that. The government did nothing. They just confiscated it from you. It's one of the most shameful taxes ever. Unbelievable. Because they despise generational wealth unless it's in their hands. You notice the Kennedys aren't screaming for this. Yikes. A separate wealth tax on billionaires. Of course, billionaires whose assets $23 billion, and a Wall Street tax on financial transactions raising at least $12 billion. They'll raise nowhere near $50 billion, folks. That's the bottom line. That's the reality of this. So don't believe what they've got to say. Do not believe it. Well, yeah, they also call for repealing President Trump's corporate tax rates, which they claim will generate $9 billion in revenue. Trump slashed that rate from 35% to 21%, as I previously mentioned. Well, that's not enough, folks, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez also has told the world that the grand old party, the Republican Party, has white supremacist sympathizers at its core. Well, thank you for the insult, Miss, how should we describe this? The person who calls for anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel. I don't know what to say about this. She's the one talking about white supremacist. You look in the mirror. Last time I checked, you're white. You're a Caucasian Hispanic lady. Maybe you missed that part of the boat. Anyway, she says, at this term, there are legitimate white supremacist sympathizers that sit at the heart and the core of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives. Ooh. When I hear Representative McCarthy is going to pull a member aside who has made white supremacist sympathizing comments, the thing I think is, what is he going to tell them? Keep it up? Wow, talk about insulting. She should be reprimanded for that language right there. And they could consider expulsion for her bigotry. Because there are no consequences to the Republican caucus for violence, kind of like the Democrats who foment and encourage domestic terrorism. Nancy Pelosi, I don't understand why there aren't more uprisings like this around the country. Or Kamala Harris, who pays the bail of domestic terrorists who torched and burned police stations and murdered people across the country. Do you mean like that? Supporting that kind of violence, Ms. Cortez? Yeah, perhaps that's what you're talking about. There are no consequences of racism. Really? The BLM movement? The divest movement on Israel, which you support? Talk about racism. No consequences for misogyny. Oh, like the attacks on Marjorie Taylor Greene. Those misogynistic attacks. Yeah. Or the misogynistic attacks that happened for a female presidential candidate from the Republican Party in 2016. Have you forgotten about that? Former Hewlett-Packard executive. Yeah. No consequences for insurrection. Oh, what about Sarah Palin? The misogynistic attacks from the left and from Democrats against Sarah Palin to this very day. Or Sarah Huckabee Sanders. What about that? What about those misogynistic? Or, for better yet, what about misogynistic attacks from members of the Democratic caucus against Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary? Wow, talk about the pot calling the kettle black, Miss Ocasio-Cortez. And no consequences means that they condone it. It means that silence is acceptance. Well, then I guess you condone anti-Semitism and misogyny and racism and hatred of your own, since your silence is condoning it by your own logic, Miss Cortez. Well, folks, what else do we have to talk about? Let's talk about the rest of it here. So that's almost the end of this segment, but Capitol Police are seeking a permanent fencing at the Capitol building in yet another effort to prevent constitutionally guaranteed rights for American citizens, the right of redress before their government, the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. All of these rights they seek to abridge. These are inalienable rights, God-given rights, which are enshrined in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And these clowns, after 230 years, simply want to tell us that we can't have them by erecting a fence on the false pretext that the Capitol is somehow under threat. There's no threat to the Capitol. These are lies, 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 lies. No lie, nothing there. The fake leaked document from the FBI that went to Fox News, which claimed that the 50 state capitals would see armed protest sometime before, during Inauguration Day, or sometime thereafter. When's the end date for that? 2097, friends? Anyway, nothing happened. No violence, no armed protesters, nothing in the 50 capitals or at the nation's capital, which now we, the people, are not allowed to see that building we pay for and those people who work for us on their false pretext. This is idiotic. This is unacceptable. This is un-American. This is something you see in North Korea or when Democrats run government on a false pretext. Disgraceful, folks. And there you have it. So they're seeking a permanent fence at the Capitol building. Unbelievable. $500 million spent on the Capitol Police for security, and this is what they're doing, taking our rights away. Because they're cowards. But it's not really because they're cowards, it's because they lie to people. There's no threat to the Capitol. Well, folks, and finally this week, what did the Dems do? It's not what they did this week, it's what they've done for the past year. Lie, and get people killed. Well, Grandma may not have gotten run over by a reindeer, but she sure got run over by Andrew Cuomo and the government of New York. And I've been saying it since March and April of 2020. I've been telling you consistently that New York is lying. New York statistics are invalid. New York is hoodwinking us. And New York's governor and his public health department got New Yorkers killed. New York, which proudly leads the nation in COVID-19 attributed deaths of 42,000 plus, has had 8,700 people die from COVID-19 in nursing homes. Only that's not the true figure, at least according to New York's Attorney General Letitia James, who did a groundbreaking investigative report into what happened in nursing homes under COVID-19. And based on the 62 nursing homes that her investigation looked at, now there's over 600 nursing homes in New York, so it's just a fraction of them. But in those 62, virtually every nursing home was undercounted by as much as 50%. Now, not all 50%, some are 5%, some are 3%, some are 20%, but virtually every one of them was undercounted by as much as 50%, thereby raising potentially the total number of deaths to over 13,000. Now, let's put this in perspective, folks. The mortality rate for COVID-19 is not the 3.4% that Dr. Tedros, the Chinese Communist Party, Dr. Fauci, and all these other people kept telling us a year ago to frighten the bejesus out of people, to make them cover their face with diapers, to not go out, to break family relations, never see their parents when they die. Yeah, that's what they used. 3.4% is what they told us. Well, that was a lie. We know from data that it is 0.2% of the people exposed to the virus die, and 85% of the people who actually die from the virus have underlying immunocompromised systems. Type 2 diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, cancer, leukemia, HIV, you name it, tuberculosis. Those are the people most likely to die, and of course, usually the elderly because of many of these conditions. So for the vast majority of people exposed to COVID-19, they get it, they recover from it. That's a fact. That's not made up. That's true. They know that, and we know that. 0.2% is the mortality rate. 0.2, but not in New York's nursing homes. The information that the governor has reported and they've been covering up for ages has said 8,700. But using Letitia James' data, if in fact it holds up and it's accurate, that figure pushes it up to 13,000 plus. Folks, there are 90,000 people living in nursing homes in New York State. That means that the fatality rate in the New York nursing homes was 14.4% of residents. Talk about disgraceful and unbelievable. Now, last year, Albany tried to cover up the fact that on March 25th, they directed nursing homes to accept people who had been in hospital and had been confirmed to be COVID-19 patients. They sent them back into nursing homes and then denied it. They lied about it. But mainstream media broke the story back in May of 2020, exposing the lies of Cuomo and the administration. And they just covered up and said, well, there's nothing to see here. Well, what they did do is that many people who contracted COVID-19 nursing homes and would have died there, save for the fact that they were taken to a hospital outside the nursing home and died there, they counted that death, but did not count it as a nursing home death. And that's one of the problems with it. So we'll see what happens here, folk. But Andrew Cuomo's political career is really on the line here. Now, will he survive it? Who knows? The Cuomos have a habit of milking and fleecing New Yorkers and hoodwinking people over the decades, and it's one generation after the other that pulls it off. The current generation of this clown in Albany, Andrew Cuomo, who got Granny killed, and his brother, Chris Cuomo, the super spreader, who ragged on everyone else, accused everyone else of being selfish and telling us that we are clowns for ignoring CDC advice, which was conflicting. They told us not to wear masks. Then they told us to wear masks. What are we supposed to do? Make up your damn mind, Dr. Fauci. I know he doesn't work for the CDC, but same guilty parties. He works for the National Institutes for Health. But Chris Cuomo came down with COVID-19. Why? Because he was reckless, his behavior. And then what did he do in his ritzy apartment building? Went to the weight room, worked out, getting his saliva, his sweat, and all of his expelling of fluids into the room, poisoning it, touching mailboxes, walking around touching door handles instead of self-isolating his apartment. This jackass who told the rest of us we have to self-quarantine when we might have been exposed to a virus, which is utter nonsense, He has the virus and knows it and knowingly endangers the people in his apartment building. He was warned repeatedly by his landlord and the building manager. This is what we get from the generation of Cuomos. Well, folks, Chris Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, well, Chris Cuomo will stay on his network because they love failures on that network. But who knows what the future holds for Andrew Cuomo. Just a few months ago, this Emmy award-winning actor, because that's what he is, an actor, had the time to write a book about leadership in the midst of COVID-19. Of course, after he demonstrated no leadership, the tyrant from Albany, Andrew Cuomo, is now on the rocks, ladies and gentlemen. And folks, that is really what the Dems did this week. So you guys give me some feedback. Give me some comments after the stream if you don't mind. Tell me what your thoughts are on this. What do you think? What do you think of this? What did the Dems do this week? Do you like this approach? Did it work for you? You let me know, folks, because I want to know if that's going to work for you guys. Anyway, that's going to conclude this segment of What Did the Dems Do This Week. I hope that you enjoyed this segment. God bless. Thanks a lot for following the channel. Feel free to leave some comments, and we'll go from there. Let's see how it goes. I've been asked to do this segment every week, and I'm going to try to produce it every week from here on out, as long as I'm around and have the time to do it. So thanks a lot, folks. Hang in there. Keep your stick on the ice. That's right.